There's a list of plants so powerful, so precisely designed for the human body, that doctors in ancient civilizations didn't prescribe medicine. They prescribed gardens. And here's what nobody tells you. Most of those plants still exist today. Some are growing in your backyard right now. One of them is probably sitting in your kitchen, and you've been throwing away the most healing part. By the time we reach plant number 9, you're going to hear something that will completely change how you look at your grocery bill and your pharmacy receipt. And plant number 14. What it does to chronic inflammation has researchers quietly calling it one of the most underestimated biological mechanisms ever documented. But we start somewhere even more surprising, because the most powerful plant on this entire list is the one the Bible mentions more than almost any other living thing on earth. Stay close. Modern medicine is extraordinary at one thing, managing symptoms. And it's genuinely terrible at one thing, asking why the symptoms exist in the first place. Your ancestors didn't have that problem. Not because they were smarter, but because they lived inside the answer every single day. The plants they ate, the roots they boiled, the leaves they crushed. They weren't folk remedies. They were precision tools. Designed, refined across thousands of years of observation, trial, and survival. And then, somewhere in the last century, we replaced almost all of them with a pill, a powder, a synthetic version of something that was already perfect. What you're about to see isn't a list of herbs. It's a record of what we lost. Plant 1. Hyssop appears in the Bible over 20 times. It was used in purification rituals, in the Passover, even at the crucifixion. But here's what the ancient world understood that we forgot. Hyssop wasn't just ceremonial. It was medicinal. Modern analysis shows hyssop contains powerful volatile oils including pinocamphone and isopinocamphone that act as expectorants, antimicrobials, and digestive stimulants. Translation: it loosens chest congestion, kills harmful bacteria, and calms the gut. What does your doctor prescribe for a chest infection? Usually an antibiotic. What did Solomon prescribe? Purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. The strange part isn't that hyssop works. The strange part is that we knew it worked for 3,000 years, and then we stopped using it. Plant 2. Frankincense. Most people think frankincense is a perfume, a gift from wise men, a candle scent. They have no idea what it actually does inside the human body. Boswellic acids, the active compounds in frankincense resin, directly suppress a specific enzyme called 5-LOX. That enzyme? It's the primary driver of chronic inflammatory disease, arthritis, asthma, inflammatory bowel disease, neurological inflammation. The pharmaceutical industry has spent decades and billions of dollars trying to block that same enzyme. The results are drugs with side effect lists longer than this script. Frankincense does it naturally, and it's been doing it since before Rome existed. Modern research from institutions, including Cardiff University, has confirmed that boswellic acids outperform certain synthetic anti-inflammatory compounds in targeted joint inflammation without damaging the stomach lining. You've been paying for the copy. The original was always available. Here's where most people make the mistake. They hear biblical plant and think ancient, primitive, replaced for a reason. But that assumption has it exactly backwards. These plants weren't replaced because something better came along. They were replaced because something more profitable came along. There's a difference. A significant one. And by the time we reach plant number 6, that difference is going to feel very personal. Plant 3, olive leaf. You know, olive oil. The whole Mediterranean world runs on it. But the leaf? Almost nobody talks about the leaf. And that's exactly where the most powerful compounds concentrate. Oleuropein, found almost exclusively in olive leaves, is one of the most potent antiviral, antibacterial, and antifungal compounds ever studied in plant biology. The ancient Egyptians considered the olive tree sacred, not for its fruit, for its leaves. They used olive leaf preparations to treat fevers and infections centuries before antibiotics existed. Here's the part that hits differently. Researchers studying oleuropein have found it disrupts the replication cycle of viruses, including strains of influenza, by interfering with the virus's ability to enter host cells. That's not folk medicine. That's molecular biology confirming what Egypt figured out 4,000 years ago. Plant 4. Aloe vera. Aloe gets underestimated because it became a sunburn gel, but the original use, the biblical use, went much deeper than skin. In ancient Hebrew tradition and Egyptian medical papyri, aloe was used internally for digestive disorders, infections, and what we would now call autoimmune flare-ups. The gel contains over 75 active compounds, vitamins, enzymes, amino acids, anthraquinones with powerful anti-inflammatory properties. And here's the part most people never hear. Aloe contains compounds called asmannan polysaccharides that directly stimulate immune cell production, your immune system, activated by a plant you probably have sitting on your windowsill. But hold that thought, because what we cover later about Plant 12 and immune function makes this look like the introduction. Plant 5. GRLA scouts talk about the one they tried to bury in a verse. Numbers 11-5. The Israelites wandering in the wilderness, lamenting the foods of Egypt, among them garlic. They missed garlic in the middle of the desert. Enough to complain to Moses about it. That's not coincidence. That's a population that understood, on a visceral level, that garlic kept them alive. Allicin, formed when garlic is crushed or chopped, is a sulfur compound with documented antibacterial activity against strains including MRSA, the antibiotic-resistant staph infection that kills tens of thousands of people annually in modern hospitals. Ancient Egyptians gave garlic to pyramid laborers not for flavor, for stamina, for resistance to disease, for survival under physical stress. And here's the retention point. Allicin is destroyed by heat. So every time you cook garlic fully, you're eliminating most of its medicinal potency. The way to use it? Crush it, let it sit for 10 minutes. Then consume it raw or lightly cooked. 10 minutes. That's the window where the enzymatic reaction completes. Most people skip it and then wonder why garlic doesn't work for them. We're 5 plants in. And I want you to notice something. Not one of these required a laboratory to discover. Not one of them needed a patent, a clinical trial, $1 billion facility. They required observation, patience, and a relationship with the natural world that the modern diet almost completely severed. What's coming next is where that severance becomes impossible to ignore. Plant 6. Fig. The fig tree is arguably the most spiritually significant plant in all of Scripture. From the Garden of Eden to the teachings of Christ, it appears at every critical moment. But here's what most people overlook. It also appears in one of the Bible's most striking medical interventions. In 2 Kings, the prophet Isaiah instructs a fig poultice to be placed on King Hezekiah's infected wound. The king was dying. After the fig poultice, he recovered. Modern research on figs reveals antimicrobial compounds in the latex and skin of unripe figs that show activity against several bacterial strains. They are also extraordinarily rich in soluble fiber, specifically pectin, which feeds beneficial gut bacteria with a precision that most modern prebiotics can't match. Fig isn't just a fruit. It was a pharmacy growing on a tree. Plant 7. Pomegranate is the plant that makes cardiologists uncomfortable when they read the studies. Pomegranate juice, not extract, not supplement, actual pomegranate, has been shown in peer-reviewed research to reduce arterial plaque in human subjects. In one landmark Israeli study, subjects drinking pomegranate juice daily showed a 30% reduction in arterial thickness over 1 year. The control group? Their plaque increased. The active compounds, punacalogens and punicic acid, are found almost nowhere else in the plant kingdom. They are antioxidants so potent, they make vitamin C look like a warm-up act. And the seeds? Don't throw them away. Punicic acid, the omega-5 fatty acid in pomegranate seeds, has shown the ability to inhibit certain cancer cell proliferation pathways in laboratory settings. Ancient texts from Persia to Egypt to Israel all reference the pomegranate as a symbol of healing and abundance. They weren't being poetic. They were being precise. Plant 8, Siamean. Most people treat cumin as a spice. Background flavor. Something you shake over meat. The ancient world treated it as medicine, regularly, deliberately. Cumin seeds contain thymoquinone when cold pressed, a compound that has shown anti-tumor properties, immune modulation effects, and direct impact on blood sugar regulation. Hippocrates referenced cumin. The Quran references black seed. Ancient Egyptian tomb excavations have found cumin seeds, carefully preserved alongside gold and jewels. You keep spices you value near things you value. They valued cumin enough to bury it with the dead. Plant 9, flaxseed. Here's the one that changes how you see your grocery bill. Flax, linen, one of the oldest cultivated plants in human history. The seeds of the flax plant contain the highest plant-based source of ALA omega-3 fatty acids on Earth. They also contain lignans, phytoestrogen compounds, that have demonstrated the ability to reduce estrogen-driven cancer risk in multiple clinical studies. But the real issue is this: omega-3 deficiency is now implicated in depression, cognitive decline, cardiovascular disease, and inflammatory conditions, affecting hundreds of millions of people worldwide. And the solution has been growing in fields since ancient Egypt. 1 tablespoon of ground flaxseed per day, that's it. Your great-grandmother probably ate it without thinking twice. She called it regular food. You'd have to buy it at a specialty health store and feel proud of yourself for discovering it. Something went wrong in between. We're more than halfway through this list. And I need you to stay with me, because plant 14 is where this entire script changes tone. What that plant does to the modern prescription model isn't just surprising. It's quietly infuriating. Plant 10, coriander, cilantro, another plant from the wilderness narrative. Manna, the miraculous food that sustained the Israelites, is described in Exodus as resembling coriander seed. Coriander contains linalool, a terpene compound that functions as a natural anxiolytic. In plain language, it calms the nervous system. Modern research has confirmed anti-anxiety effects in animal studies, comparable to certain pharmaceutical sedatives, without the dependency profile. Your ancestors weren't anxious, not because their lives were easier, but because the plants in their daily diet were actively regulating their nervous systems. Plant 11, cedar. This one surprises people every time. Cedar isn't a food. But in Leviticus, it's listed as a healing agent used in cleansing rituals for skin disease, specifically the condition scholars believe was a form of psoriasis or severe dermatitis. Modern aromatherapy research on cedarwood oil shows it contains cedrol, a sesquiterpene compound with sedative, anti-inflammatory, and antifungal properties. When inhaled, cedrol measurably reduces cortisol response, your stress hormone. Reduced by the smell of a tree. The ancient world built temples from cedar not only for strength, but possibly because spending time inside cedar structures had a measurable calming effect on the human nervous system. And that raises a question nobody is asking. What else were they building into their daily environment that was quietly healing them? Plant 12, wormwood. Wormwood has a dark reputation. Most people know it as the bitter plant associated with judgment in Revelation. But before it became a symbol, it was a medicine. Artemisia absinthium, The scientific name for wormwood contains artemisinin. That compound is now used in the most effective malaria treatments on Earth. A Nobel Prize in Medicine was awarded in 2015 for the discovery of artemisin's antiparasitic properties. The plant was used for intestinal parasites in traditional medicine for centuries. The discovery, celebrated as a scientific breakthrough, was found by going back to ancient Chinese and Middle Eastern botanical texts. They weren't discovered, they were remembered. Immune function loop closed. The plant dismissed as bitter and symbolic turned out to be one of the most important antiparasitic agents ever found in nature. Plant 13, Spikenard Mary of Bethany, broke open an alabaster jar of spikenard to anoint Jesus. It was worth a year's wages. That detail alone should stop you. People don't spend a year's wages on perfume. They spend it on medicine, on survival, on things that matter. Nardostiches. Jatamansi, spikenard, contains compounds with documented neuroprotective effects. Research from institutions in India and Japan has shown it protects against oxidative stress in neural tissue, reduces anxiety markers, and improves sleep architecture. A year's wages for something that protects the brain and calms the nervous system. In today's terms, they were buying the most valuable neurological medicine available. And they kept it in an alabaster jar. Here's the reversal I promised you. We've been calling these ancient remedies. But what if the ancient world was simply using medicine, and what we do now is the experiment that hasn't proven itself yet? The pharmaceutical model is barely 100 years old. These plants have clinical histories stretching back 4,000 years. Which one is experimental? Plant 14, milk thistle, here it is. The one that makes the prescription model uncomfortable. Silybum marianum, milk thistle, contains silymarin. And silymarin does something almost no pharmaceutical compound can do. It regenerates liver cells. Not protects. Not supports. Regenerates. The liver, your body's primary detoxification organ, the organ under assault from processed food, alcohol, medications, and environmental toxins every single day, can be actively assisted in cellular repair by a plant that grows wild across the Mediterranean and the Middle East. Here's the infuriating part. There is no prescription drug that regenerates liver tissue. There isn't one. The pharmaceutical industry doesn't have an answer for cirrhotic liver disease, beyond slow the damage and wait for a transplant. Milk thistle has been studied for liver regeneration since the 1960s. German health authorities formally approved it as a liver treatment in the 1980s. It grows wild. It costs almost nothing. It can be made into tea, and yet, you've probably never once had a doctor mention it. What gets protected when a plant like this stays obscure? Think about that carefully. And think about it again when we reach the final plant on this list. Plant 15, Mandrake. Genesis 30. Rachel and Leah negotiating over mandrake roots in a field. Whatever they believed mandrake could do, it was valuable enough to barter a husband's night for it. Mandrake contains tropane, alkaloids, compounds with real documented biological activity, including antispasmodic, analgesic, and sedative effects. It was used as surgical anesthesia in the ancient world. Before ether, before chloroform, before the operating room, they put people to sleep for surgery with a root. Plant 16, balm of Gilead. Is there no balm in Gilead? Jeremiah asked that question as a metaphor for spiritual desolation, because the balm of Gilead was so well understood as a healer that its absence represented total hopelessness. The resin of the Commiphora gileadensis tree contains compounds with documented antimicrobial, wound healing, and anti-inflammatory effects. Ancient trade routes were organized specifically to transport it. Wars were fought over the territories that produced it. You don't build trade empires around things that don't work. Plant 17, Myrrh. We end where wisdom begins. Myrrh, the other gift of the wise men, present at the birth. present at the burial, present at every critical threshold of the biblical narrative, and present, whether anyone acknowledged it or not, as one of the most chemically complex and therapeutically rich botanical resins ever studied. Terpenoids in myrrh have shown anti-cancer activity in laboratory studies, antimicrobial activity against drug-resistant bacteria, anti-inflammatory pathways that researchers are still mapping. It was given to a newborn not only as treasure, it was given as protection. Think about what that means. The most important birth in the history of Western civilization, and the gifts brought weren't weapons, land, or money. They were plants, frankincense, myrrh, gold, yes, but surrounded by medicine. The wise men understood something we forgot. The moment we stopped asking plants for help. Here's what I want you to walk away with. This isn't about rejecting medicine. This isn't about burning your prescriptions. This is about remembering something your body already knows. That healing isn't new, that the tools have always existed. That somewhere between the ancient garden and the modern pharmacy, we accepted a story that nature needed to be improved, synthesized, patented, and sold back to us. And 17 plants just quietly disagreed. Hyssop, frankincense, olive leaf, aloe, garlic, fig, pomegranate, cumin flax, coriander, cedar, wormwood, spikenard, milk, thistle, mandrake, balm of Gilead, myrrh. They were here before the prescription pad. They'll be here after it. The question isn't whether they work. The question is, why did it take you this long to hear about them? If this opens something for you, share it with someone who needs it. Because this kind of knowledge doesn't spread through algorithms. It spreads the way it always did, person to person. The way your ancestors passed it down. Subscribe. Because we're just getting started.